The skies over the Middle East are quiet for now. A deceptive stillness hangs in the air, a stark contrast to the recent chaos. The silence is heavy, pregnant with the potential for renewed conflict. It's a moment of fragile peace, a brief respite in a region accustomed to turmoil. The world watches, holding its breath, hoping this quiet will last, but knowing deep down that the underlying tensions remain. In early summer 2025, a tense calm follows a storm of military fire. The echoes of explosions still reverberate in the minds of those who witnessed the devastation. The landscape bears the scars of war, a testament to the destructive power unleashed. Military bases stand as silent sentinels, a constant reminder of the ever-present threat. The air is thick with the smell of smoke and the dust of shattered buildings, a grim reminder of the price of conflict. After an Iranian missile attack on northern Israel, a barrage of rockets rained down, testing the limits of Israel's defense systems. The skies were ablaze with interceptors, desperately trying to neutralize the incoming threat. The attack was a clear escalation, a bold move that threatened to destabilize the entire region. It was a moment of grave danger, a spark that could have ignited a full-blown war. The U.S., under President Trump, retaliated with powerful airstrikes. The response was swift and decisive, a show of force intended to deter further aggression. American fighter jets roared into the sky, carrying a payload of destruction aimed at key Iranian targets. The message was clear. The U.S. would not tolerate attacks on its allies and would use its military might to defend its interests on Iran's key nuclear sites. The airstrikes were precise and targeted, designed to cripple Iran's nuclear ambitions. Satellite images revealed the extent of the damage, with plumes of smoke rising from the targeted facilities. The attacks were a major setback for Iran's nuclear program, but they also carried the risk of further escalation. The world held its breath, waiting to see how Iran would respond. Trump declared the brief air war over, calling for peace. He stood at the presidential podium, projecting an image of strength and resolve. He declared victory, claiming that the airstrikes had achieved their objectives. But he also extended an olive branch, calling for dialogue and negotiations. It was a calculated move, a blend of military force and diplomatic overture, and framing the strikes as a step toward negotiations. He argued that the airstrikes had created an opportunity for a new beginning, a chance to resolve the underlying issues through peaceful means. He emphasized the importance of diplomacy and cooperation, urging Iran to come to the negotiating table. But many remained skeptical, questioning whether Iran would be willing to engage in genuine negotiations. Yet this silence is fragile, haunted by unresolved conflict. Beneath the surface of calm, tensions simmer. Military patrols remain vigilant, ever watchful for signs of renewed aggression. The threat of another attack looms large, casting a shadow over the fragile peace. It's a precarious situation, one that could easily unravel with a single misstep. Intelligence suggests Iran anticipated the attacks, indicating a level of preparedness that raises serious concerns. Analysts pore over satellite images and intercepted communications, piecing together the puzzle of Iran's strategic planning. The intelligence community is working overtime to assess the true extent of Iran's capabilities and intentions. The stakes are high and the margin for error is slim, moving critical nuclear assets before the bombs fell. Convoys of trucks and armored vehicles were seen transporting sensitive materials to undisclosed locations. The movement was carefully orchestrated, designed to protect Iran's nuclear program from potential damage. It was a calculated gamble, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Iran's nuclear program is decentralized and resilient, making it a difficult target to eliminate completely. The facilities are scattered across the country, hidden beneath layers of concrete and steel. The program is designed to withstand attack, with redundant systems and backup plans in place. It's a formidable challenge for any military force, making it nearly impossible to destroy from the air. The underground bunkers are heavily fortified, capable of withstanding even the most powerful bombs. The facilities are protected by sophisticated air defense systems, designed to intercept incoming missiles and aircraft. A ground invasion would be costly and dangerous, with no guarantee of success. Now, the U.S. faces a dilemma, a complex and multifaceted challenge that requires careful consideration. Military strategists are locked in intense debates, weighing the pros and cons of various options. The decision of how to proceed will have far-reaching consequences, shaping the future of the region and the world. It cannot bomb what it cannot find, highlighting the critical importance of accurate intelligence. Without precise information about the location of Iran's nuclear facilities, further airstrikes would be ineffective and potentially counterproductive. The U.S. must rely on its intelligence assets to gather the necessary information, a task that is both difficult and time-consuming, and future progress depends on Iranian cooperation. Ultimately, a lasting solution can only be achieved through dialogue and negotiation. Iran must be willing to come to the table and engage in good faith discussions. The alternative is a continued cycle of conflict and instability, a path that benefits no one. The path forward leads not through more airstrikes, but through the uncertain terrain of diplomacy. It's a path fraught with challenges and obstacles, but it's the only path that offers a hope for a peaceful resolution. The world watches, waiting to see if Iran and the U.S. can find a way to bridge their differences and build a more stable future. The stakes are high, and the time is now. In the complex arena of international relations, the application of military force often presents itself as a tempting shortcut, promising swift resolutions to deeply entrenched problems. The allure of a quick fix, the idea that a show of strength can rapidly alter the course of events, is a recurring theme in geopolitical strategies. However, the reality on the ground is invariably more intricate and nuanced than such simplistic solutions suggest. The dynamics at play are multifaceted, involving historical grievances, cultural differences, and a web of interconnected interests that defy easy categorization or resolution. Consider, for instance, the hypothetical scenario of U.S. strikes targeting Iran's nuclear sites. Such an action might initially appear to be a decisive demonstration of power, a clear signal of resolve aimed at curtailing Iran's nuclear ambitions. Yet even a successful military operation capable of inflicting significant damage on physical infrastructure would ultimately fall short of achieving its intended objective. It couldn't completely erase the underlying knowledge, the accumulated expertise, or the unwavering will that fuels the program. The human element, the intellectual capital invested in nuclear research, remains a potent force that transcends physical destruction. The challenge lies in the fact that Iran's nuclear expertise and essential materials are not concentrated in a single, easily targeted location. Instead, they are deliberately dispersed across a network of facilities, many of which are carefully concealed and heavily fortified. These facilities are designed to withstand conventional airstrikes, rendering them largely immune to direct military intervention. Furthermore, the act of destroying physical facilities, while potentially disruptive in the short term, does not fundamentally alter the underlying intentions or motivations driving a nation's nuclear ambitions. In fact, such actions can often have the unintended consequence of deepening mistrust, exacerbating existing tensions, and providing justification for further pursuing nuclear capabilities as a deterrent against future aggression. Each perceived act of aggression, each instance of external pressure, serves to reinforce Iran's belief that possessing nuclear capabilities is not merely a matter of national prestige, but a fundamental requirement for its long-term survival and security in a volatile regional environment. As a result, the nuclear program is driven further underground, becoming even more secretive and difficult to monitor. Iran, feeling increasingly cornered and isolated on the international stage, may perceive its nuclear program as its last line of defense. In such a scenario, the U.S. may have achieved a tactical victory by destroying certain facilities, but it has ultimately failed to win the larger war for peace and stability in the region. Lasting progress requires a fundamentally different approach, one that prioritizes building trust, fostering dialogue, and addressing the underlying grievances that fuel conflict, rather than simply relying on the blunt instrument of military force. The most significant obstacle to resolving the Iranian nuclear issue is not a lack of military options, but rather the deep-seated and long-standing mistrust that exists between Tehran and Washington. Iran's mistrust of the U.S. is rooted in decades of broken promises and interventions. The 1953 CIA-backed coup and U.S. support for Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War are seared into Iran's memory. These events taught Iranian leaders that only self-reliance guarantees sovereignty. U.S. calls for Iran to act like a normal nation are seen as demands for surrender. For Iran, compliance with U.S. demands feels like inviting future vulnerability. Before diplomacy can succeed, the U.S. must confront this legacy of mistrust. For Iran, fear of betrayal is a lesson learned from history, not mere paranoia. The 2003 Iraq invasion is a defining lesson for Iran. Saddam Hussein dismantled his WMDs, yet was invaded and deposed. Iran saw that compliance with inspectors offered no protection from regime change. This convinced Tehran that only a nuclear deterrent could guarantee security. Hardliners use Iraq as proof that transparency is a trap, and that the US seeks regime change, not disarmament. Iran's secrecy and resilience are strategic responses to this precedent. Any US diplomatic effort must address the shadow of Iraq and prove its intentions are different. Only actions, not words, can rebuild trust. The collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, deepened Iran's mistrust. Iran complied, but the US withdrew and reimposed sanctions, punishing Iran for its cooperation. This showed Tehran that US agreements are unreliable and subject to political change. Hardliners now argue that diplomacy with America is futile. Any new deal will require stronger guarantees, ones that can survive US political shifts. The challenge for American diplomats is to make commitments credible and durable. Overcoming the legacy of the JCPOA's collapse is essential for progress. Without trust in US promises, Iran sees little reason to negotiate. The solution demands more than clever diplomacy. It requires real, lasting assurances. Ukraine's fate is a stark and cautionary tale, especially for Iran. Ukraine made the pivotal decision to give up its nuclear arsenal, receiving security guarantees in return. However, those guarantees proved insufficient, as Russia invaded years later. The promises enshrined in the Budapest Memorandum ultimately proved hollow and unreliable. For Iran, this historical event strongly reinforces the belief that only robust self-defense capabilities can truly ensure its survival and security. The US faces the challenge of convincing Iran that its promises this time are fundamentally different, an extremely high bar to clear given the circumstances. The Ukrainian tragedy casts a long shadow over these negotiations, serving as a stark warning to Iran against trusting outside assurances and guarantees. In this complex and uncertain world, Iran firmly believes that only its own strength and capabilities can ultimately guarantee its future security. US diplomacy with Iran. It's a complex dance of strategy and negotiation, a high-stakes game played on the world stage. The relationship is fraught with historical tensions and present-day challenges, making any progress a delicate and hard-won achievement, is trapped in a paradox, a seemingly inescapable loop of actions and reactions that undermines its own goals. This paradox stems from the inherent contradiction in trying to coerce a nation into cooperation through pressure, while simultaneously seeking to build a foundation of trust. To gain leverage, America uses threats and sanctions, projecting power and aiming to force concessions. Economic sanctions cripple Iran's economy, while military posturing sends a clear message of potential intervention. These tactics are designed to bring Iran to the negotiating table from a position of perceived weakness. But these same actions destroy the credibility of its promises. The very tools used to exert pressure erode the trust necessary for meaningful dialogue. How can Iran believe in the sincerity of US assurances when those assurances are juxtaposed against a backdrop of economic warfare and military threats? Every show of force deepens Iran's fear, reinforcing a narrative of external aggression and undermining any incentive to compromise. The sight of warships and the imposition of sanctions fuel a sense of vulnerability and paranoia within the Iranian leadership, that the US seeks domination, not peace. From the Iranian perspective, these actions are not about achieving a mutually beneficial agreement, but rather about imposing American will and control over the region. This perception makes genuine negotiation all the more difficult. Iran is asked to trust the same power that threatens it. This fundamental contradiction lies at the heart of the diplomatic impasse. It's a request that defies logic and ignores the deep-seated historical grievances that fuel Iranian distrust. The unpredictability of US politics, especially after the JCPOA withdrawal, has further exacerbated this problem. The abrupt abandonment of a previously agreed-upon international accord sent shockwaves through the Iranian leadership, reinforcing their skepticism about the reliability of American commitments. Makes any new deal risky for Iran. Why should Iran invest in a new agreement if there's a significant chance that it will be unilaterally discarded by a future US administration? This fear of future betrayal looms large over any potential negotiations. Military threats are immediate. They represent a clear and present danger that demands a response. The presence of U.S. naval forces in the Persian Gulf serves as a constant reminder of the potential for military conflict. Promises of relief are uncertain. The lifting of sanctions and the normalization of relations are contingent on future actions and subject to the whims of political change. This asymmetry creates a powerful disincentive for Iran to fully commit to any agreement. This logic drives Iran to keep its nuclear leverage. In the absence of credible assurances and facing constant threats, Iran views its nuclear program as a deterrent, a means of ensuring its own security and preventing external aggression. The U.S. must make its assurances as credible as its threats. It needs to demonstrate a genuine commitment to diplomacy and a willingness to build a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding through restraint, not just pressure. A shift in approach is needed, one that prioritizes de-escalation and confidence-building measures over coercive tactics. This requires a willingness to engage in genuine dialogue and to address Iran's legitimate security concerns. Only tangible, verifiable actions can break this cycle. Symbolic gestures and empty promises are not enough. The U.S. must demonstrate its commitment to a new path through concrete steps that build trust and demonstrate a genuine desire for peaceful resolution. Without this shift, American policy will remain self-defeating. The current approach, characterized by threats and sanctions, is not only ineffective but also counterproductive, pushing Iran further away from cooperation and increasing the risk of escalation. A new strategy is urgently needed, one that prioritizes diplomacy, trust-building, and mutual respect. To build trust, the U.S. must address Iran's fear of an Israeli attack. Even with a deal, Israel could act unilaterally, undermining diplomacy. The U.S. should condition military support to Israel on restraint during negotiations or compliance. This isn't abandoning Israel but using leverage to prevent war and create space for diplomacy. Such a move would face political resistance, but is essential for credibility. True strength means restraining allies when necessary for peace. Only then can the U.S. offer Iran a genuine security guarantee. The U.S. must credibly disavow regime change as a goal. It's a crucial step towards building trust. Iran's leaders believe America seeks their overthrow, a deep-seated suspicion that fuels much of their policy. Not just behavior change. This perception needs to be addressed directly. Words aren't enough. Actions speak louder in this context. The U.S. should reduce its military presence and de-escalate in the region. This will demonstrate a commitment to stability. Drawing down forces and seeking regional commitments against regime change would reassure Tehran. This isn't endorsing Iran's government, but recognizing that trust is impossible while threatening its existence. Concrete steps to de-escalate would remove a major barrier to a deal. Only then can real negotiations begin. For diplomacy to work, sanctions relief must be immediate and tangible. Iran's experience with the JCPOA taught it that economic promises can vanish overnight. The U.S. should offer phased sanctions relief as soon as a framework is reached, not as a distant reward. Immediate benefits like oil exports and financial access would prove U.S. commitment. Embedding relief in a multilateral framework makes it harder to reverse. This approach turns sanctions into an incentive for cooperation, not just punishment. By front-loading benefits, the U.S. can change the negotiation dynamic. Real, durable relief is key to making any deal attractive and sustainable for Iran. Lasting peace with Iran won't come from more threats or bombs. The airstrikes exposed the limits of military power. They set back Iran's program but didn't end it. The real obstacle is the lack of credible American promises. True strength is the ability to withhold force and reward cooperation. The U.S. must rein in allies, disavow regime change, and provide real sanctions relief. These steps offer concrete proof of intent and address the core mistrust. With Iran's capabilities damaged, there's a rare chance for diplomacy. Only by convincing Iran it no longer needs nuclear arms can peace be achieved. That's a task bombs can never accomplish.